When I sold my home, I told myself it was the right thing to do. The house was too big, too quiet, too full of echoes of Frank's laugh and the soft clink of his teacup against the saucer he always insisted on using. The idea of helping my daughter and her family buy theirs felt like a second chance at warmth. I cashed out what I had and signed over every cent for the down payment on a lovely 2-story in a leafy part of Bloomfield, close to good schools and yoga studios, as Lainey had put it with a hopeful grin. They built me a suite above the garage. It was cozy, 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, a window that caught the morning light just right. Lainey called it Mom's little haven, though I noticed it was also where the old treadmill and unused storage bins quietly found their way. Most mornings began with Liam knocking on my door, his tiny voice whispering, "Grandma, are the pancakes ready yet?" He'd climb into the tall stool at my counter and watch as I flipped the batter, always heart-shaped, always with extra blueberries. In those moments, I felt useful, wanted, like I was building something again, even if it was just breakfast. Lainey would breeze in just before 9, still in her athletic wear hair, in a perfect ponytail yoga mat slung over one shoulder. "You're a lifesaver, Mom," she'd say, with a quick kiss to my cheek. She always smelled like expensive perfume and dry shampoo. Then she'd grab a to-go smoothie, shout something about needing to run errands, and vanish. The house would be still again, except for the sound of cartoons and little feet chasing each other upstairs. In the evenings, I'd help with dinner, fold laundry that wasn't mine, and tidy up spaces I hadn't used. When I was younger, I used to say, love was an action, not a word. I still believe that. I just didn't realize love can look exactly like servitude when no one offers it back. One Sunday, as I stood flipping pancakes and listening to Liam hum a tune I didn't recognize, I caught myself whispering, "Don't get used to this, sweetheart." I didn't mean for him. I meant for me. I didn't know it yet, but I was already saying goodbye. It started with 20s. Small bills slipped from my purse into Lainey's hand as she passed by in a flurry, always saying she left her wallet upstairs or that the cafe only took cash. I told myself it was nothing mothers help their daughters, especially when they're juggling 2 kids and a demanding husband. But the requests didn't stop. They just changed form. 50 here, 70 there, and then, one Tuesday morning, she lingered by the door with a hopeful smile. "Mom, could I maybe borrow $150? Chad just got paid, but the transfer's pending. We're going out for our anniversary tonight, and I'd hate to cancel." I handed it over without a word. I think I even smiled. But something shifted. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, and the dishwasher hummed softly in the background, I stood at my little window and realized I had pulled that money from the cash envelope I'd kept since Frank died. He'd called it our "if everything goes wrong" fund. He'd never said the words, but I knew he meant if something happens to me, you'll have this. The next week, Chad dropped a stack of utility bills on the edge of my kitchenette counter. No note, no explanation, just placed them there like I was the accounts department. I thought maybe it was a mistake, but the following month he did it again, only this time it included the lawn service invoice and a receipt for pest control. My little suite over the garage, once mine started filling with odds and ends, they didn't want upstairs. An old rowing machine blocked the window. Boxes of Lainey's seasonal decor took over the closet. I moved my sweaters to a bin under the bed. I called Brenda one night. She was still working part-time at the high school, and I could hear the soft clatter of keys behind her as we talked. "Carol, I love you," she said after I told her everything. "But you need to open your eyes. They're not leaning on you. They're living off you." I told her she was being dramatic. But her words echoed louder than I expected when I found a second stack of bills waiting for me that Friday this time, with a sticky note that said simply, "Thanks, Mom." They always made it sound like a favor I'd be glad to do. "It's just until the school refund comes through," Lainey said, when the private kindergarten's registration fee appeared on my nightstand one morning, tucked inside a brightly colored envelope addressed in crayon to Grandma. Or when Chad texted me midweek, "Could you pick up groceries? Lainey's slammed and I'm buried at the office." I never said no. I'd spent a lifetime saying yes. At first I kept track. A tidy little ledger I started on a notepad just for my own clarity. After a while, though, it felt like recording my own humiliation. What was the point? I wasn't going to ask for it back. I stopped writing things down. I told myself I was investing in family. That's what Frank would have said, write family first. He hadn't been gone long enough for me to stop hearing him in the kitchen, humming, telling me not to forget the coupons. By the time spring came, I had cut into every safety net we'd ever built. My pension, the emergency savings, even the CD we'd opened the year Liam was born. There was always a new reason. A flat tire, a surprise medical bill, a broken water heater. It didn't matter that it wasn't mine. It mattered that it was needed. One Thursday night, Lainey knocked on my sweet door with a bright smile and a bottle of wine she never intended to open. "Guess what?" she chirped, dragging Chad behind her like a trophy. "We're going to the Bahamas. All expenses paid. Can you believe it?" Her tone was practiced, excited, but humble enough to feign surprise. "It's a gift, really," she added, like she was granting me a privilege. "Just 7 days. The kids adore you. It'll be fun. We'll FaceTime." I nodded, smiled even. What else could I do? Later that night, I sat in bed holding one of Frank's old flannel shirts, trying to remember the last thing he said to me about Lainey that wasn't a joke or a shrug. We never saw this coming, not in her. In the morning, I found a packing list on the kitchen counter with a note scribbled beside it. "Can you pick these up at the store? We're out of time." The list included sunscreen, travel snacks, and noise-canceling headphones. There was no mention of the children. It was buried between a grocery store circular and a coupon booklet. I hadn't asked for just another envelope in the usual stack of mail. I almost tossed it aside. The return address was familiar, but distant, like a name I hadn't said out loud in years. I slid my finger under the flap without much thought, the way you open something old you expect to be meaningless. Inside were 5 pages, crisp and quiet, detailing the activity on an emergency credit card. Frank and I had opened during the recession, a card we promised to use only if every other option failed. After he passed, I locked it away in the back of the fireproof box and forgot it existed. But Lainey hadn't. Near the bottom of the second page, nestled between boutique charges and casual dinners, was the one that stopped my breath mid-chest: sunshine travel, 7/4/52/13. Dated 2 weeks ago. The Bahamas. Their gift. Paid for with my card, my money, our safety. I stared at the statement for what must have been an hour, each line item, a wound I didn't know I had. There was no mistake, no paperwork delay, just a story carefully crafted, delivered with bright smiles and grateful eyes, wrapped in the illusion of a treat they deserved. And I had believed them, not because I was naive, but because I wanted to be wrong. I tucked the papers back into the envelope and slid it into the drawer beside my bed. I didn't confront them, didn't say a word. When they returned a few days later, glowing from sun and alcohol, Lainey handed me a t-shirt that read, "My mom stayed home while I went to paradise." She laughed as if it were funny. I laughed too, though the sound felt like it belonged to someone else. Later that night, when the house had gone quiet, I made tea and sat by the window with the statement in my lap. It wasn't just the lie. It was the confidence in which they told it, the certainty that I wouldn't know or wouldn't care, that I wouldn't look, that I'd keep my eyes down and my hands open. That night, for the first time since Frank died, I locked the door to my suite. It wasn't fear that made me do it. It was the understanding that they no longer saw it as mine. It was a Thursday morning. Lainey had come in to drop off Liam's missing lunchbox and ask again if I could watch the kids Friday night so she and Chad could attend a networking dinner. She left in her usual rush, her keys in one hand, her oversized tote in the other. 10 minutes later, I noticed her phone still sitting on my table beside the folded dish towel she never picked up. I called out her name instinctively, then remembered she was long gone. I picked up the phone to bring it back upstairs, but the screen lit up before I could move. A text preview blinked across the top. Chad. When will she sign it? I want this done. I froze. The phone didn't have a lock screen. Lainey must have disabled it for convenience, or maybe because she thought no one would ever check. Maybe she was right until now. I tapped the message and opened a conversation that would hollow me out in seconds. Lainey. She's stalling. Wants to review the details like she's still working in a registrar's office. It's pathetic. Chad. She is pathetic. Just guilt and savings with a sweater on. Lainey. At least she's funding her own replacement. Chad. She still thinks the POA is for her peace of mind. Lainey. Once it's signed, we move fast. Mr. Brantley said we can liquidate within 6 weeks. Chad. Siesta Key by Summer Lainey. If I can get her into Whispering Pines before Easter? Yes. Chad, old maid, gets a roommate and we get a view. I couldn't breathe. Each message landed like a slap, but it wasn't the betrayal that made it hard to stand. It was the ease, the casual cruelty. They didn't just use me, they laughed while doing it. I scrolled further. Lainey. We should have pushed for this last year. She's gotten bolder since Frank died. Chad Boulder. She's folding laundry and flipping pancakes. Don't give her too much credit. Lainey. She used to be the smartest woman I knew. Now she's just convenient. That one stung. I put the phone down like it was burning. Outside, the wind rattled a loose branch against the garage siding. Inside, the silence was thunderous. I stood there still in my house slippers, with a full load of clean laundry in the basket behind me. The same woman they called a maid. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there remembering the first time Lainey asked if I wanted to move in. It'll be perfect, she'd said, like one big family under one roof. What she meant was one roof she didn't have to pay for. I walked to the drawer and pulled out the envelope with the credit card statement, then added a sticky note that said, "File confirmed." Lainey returned that afternoon smiling too wide, her eyes scanning my face, like she already knew the answer she wanted. She carried a leather folder in one hand and a steaming mug in the other. "I thought I'd bring you some chamomile," she said, setting the cup down on the coffee table. "You looked a little pale this morning." I nodded slowly. "Thanks, dear." She sat beside me and opened the folder with a smooth, practiced motion. "So," she said lightly, "I've been thinking it's probably a good time to get your paperwork in order, just in case. God forbid anything happens, right?" Her tone was too cheerful, too rehearsed. I glanced at the first page. Power of attorney. I had a friend help draft it. It's super basic, nothing scary. Just means I can make decisions if something comes up. Like banking, medical stuff, that sort of thing. Totally standard. She pushed the folder toward me and picked up her phone, scrolling like it wasn't part of the plan. "Let me know if you have questions," she added. Then her phone rang, Chad's name glowing on the screen. "Oh, it's just him. I'll call him back in a bit." She tapped the screen quickly, not bothering to check if the call ended. She set the phone down next to the folder and stood to check the thermostat. "Too warm in here," I didn't answer. My eyes were fixed on the phone, still lit, still active. Then his voice, distant but clear. "So did she sign?" Lainey didn't flinch. Maybe she didn't hear it yet. I stayed still. "She's close," she replied, but not to me. Her voice was lower, sharp. "She's hesitating, wants to read it carefully. Still playing registrar." She turned her back, walked to the kitchen. My hands stayed folded in my lap. "She has no clue," she whispered. "None. I even brought her tea, for God's sake." Chad's voice crackled through. "Get it done, Lainey. We need those assets moved before summer. And once we get that signature," she added softly, "we can finally start over without the guilt and the babysitting." I didn't move, didn't breathe. My own daughter preparing to sweep me into silence. Lainey turned around moments later, radiant with concern, the mug of tea now in her hands. "Here, sip this. It'll help." I looked up at her, smiled faintly, and placed my fingers on the rim without lifting it. "I think I'll wait just a little while," I said, letting the warmth drift toward me like a fog I had no intention of walking into. She sat back, reassured, and I began planning. I called Brenda that night. I didn't cry, didn't tremble. My voice was steady as I told her what I'd overheard, what I'd read, what they had planned. There was a pause on her end, heavy with disbelief, then fury. "Don't say a word to them," she said finally. "Play dumb. Let them think you're still their sweet, clueless backup plan." That was all I needed. The next morning, while Lainey was at yoga and the house was quiet, I pulled out the fireproof box from the back of my closet. Inside were the last uncorrupted pieces of my past. Frank's estate folder, our old brokerage statements, the deed to the house. My name sat there in clean, official font. No co-owner, no shared title. Just Loretta Garrison, bold and alone. I called Mr. Halprin. He had been Frank's advisor for years, a man who'd once said I was the most organized spouse he'd ever met. He remembered me instantly. "Carol always said you were the sharper one?" He chuckled. "What can I do for you, Loretta?" I told him everything, at least the part that mattered. I needed to secure my accounts, liquidate a portion of my portfolio, move assets to a protected account in my name alone. No family access, no shared signatures. He didn't ask why. By the end of the meeting, we had a new plan in motion, an irrevocable trust bearing my husband's name, dedicated solely to Liam and Cora's future education. Administered by a neutral third party. Chad and Lainey would never touch a dime. I left his office with a copy of the trust in a heavy envelope and an appointment with an estate attorney named Aubrey Wynne. Ms. Wynne didn't flinch when I laid out my intentions. She nodded, calm and efficient. "We'll revoke all former POAs and draft a new one with your chosen agent," she said. "We'll also begin the paperwork for the house. When you're ready, we'll list it." When I returned home that afternoon, the house looked the same. Toys in the hallway, dishes in the sink, a grocery list on the counter with my name penciled beside it. Lainey barely glanced up from her laptop when I walked in, but I wasn't hers anymore. By the following week, the for sale sign was ordered. They pulled into the driveway late that afternoon, just as the realtor's installer was hammering the post into the grass. I watched from the upstairs window, the one they forgot I still had access to. Chad got out of the car first, his jaw already tightening. Lainey followed slower, as if her brain couldn't catch up to her eyes. She stormed inside the screen door, slamming hard enough to rattle the entryway mirror. "Mom," she snapped, breathless. What is that sign doing on our lawn? I walked out from my suite and met her at the top of the stairs. It's not our lawn, I said gently. It's mine. Chad barreled in behind her. This is insane. You can't just sell the house. We live here. I stepped to the side and opened the folder I had prepared. The deed was on top. I handed it to Lainey without a word. She scanned it, her fingers trembling. This doesn't make sense. It does, I said. It always has. You just never asked. Chad looked from her to me, then back again. You're throwing us out. No, I said. You made choices. I'm just following through on mine. Lainey's voice dropped to a brittle whisper. Where are we supposed to go? I looked at her for a long moment, letting the silence say what I didn't need to. She had planned to put me in a facility. She had written me out of the life I built. The buyers offered. Over asking, I added. We close in 30 days. She opened her mouth to argue again, but I turned away. I had no interest in performing for her anymore. Not as caretaker, not as victim. Behind me, I heard her whisper something to Chad. He didn't reply. They were still frozen in the entryway when I stepped back into my suite and shut the door behind me. I had tea to finish and boxes to pack. They tried everything after that pleading, bargaining, even veiled threats. Chad cornered me in the hallway with a printout from some website about occupancy rights. Lainey left photo albums open on the kitchen table pages, turned to holidays and birthdays, hoping I'd feel something soft enough to change course. I didn't. I sat with them one last time in the dining room. No food between us, just their desperation filling the silence. Chad cleared his throat and leaned forward. You're really going through with this. After everything we've done for you, I didn't flinch. I have recordings, I said quietly. Text messages. Signed documents. A trust in place. A lawyer on file. You have no legal standing and you know it. Lainey's face crumpled. We're your family, she whispered. What kind of mother does this? The kind who finally learned the difference between love and being used. A beat passed. Then the soft sound of footsteps, Liam and Cora standing at the doorway, their eyes wide and confused. They didn't understand what was being said, only that something was breaking. I stood and walked to them, kneeling low so I could hold them close. You'll be okay, I whispered into their hair. I promise. Grandma's going to make sure of it. They clung to me, trembling. Behind them, I heard their parents fall into silence. There was nothing left for them to say, and everything left for me to do. The mornings in Charleston come slow and golden. I wake when I choose brew my coffee strong and sit on the balcony watching the marsh breathe. No footsteps, no requests, no notes on the counter with my name penciled in. At the library, I shelve books and answer quiet questions. On weekends, I paint water lilies that never ask for more. Once a month, Liam and Cora visit. We read, we laugh, we build sandcastles that never need to last. I am no one's burden, no one's afterthought. I am Loretta Garrison, and I live alone by choice, not circumstance.